Hello, and welcome to What is Innovation, the podcast that explores the reality of a word that is in danger of losing its meaning altogether. This podcast is produced by Outlast Consulting, LLC, a boutique consultancy that helps companies use innovation principles to solve their toughest business problems. I'm your host, Jared Simmons, and I'm so excited to have Dr. John Ennis. Dr. John Ennis, president and co-founder of Aigora, is a world-renowned authority on the application of artificial intelligence to sensory and consumer science. John is a PhD mathematician who conducted his postdoctoral studies in computational neuroscience and who has more than a dozen years of experience as a sensory and consumer science consultant. Author of over 40 peer-reviewed articles and 2 books, John is chair of both the ASTM E18 Sensory Evaluation Division and the Sensometric Society. Invited speaker and workshop organizer at international conferences, host of the popular industry podcast Aigora, a member of the editorial boards of both Food Quality and Preference and Journal of Sensory Studies, and past winner of the Food Quality and Preference Researcher of the Future Award. John, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh yeah, pleasure to be here, Jared. Thanks a lot.
I had a great time on your podcast, and so I really appreciate you making time to spend time with us.
Yeah, of course.
Why don't we dive right in?
Mm-hmm.
What, in your mind, is innovation?
Well, I think that the key thing is that innovation and invention are 2 different things.
Mm-hmm.
That, invention, you have some new idea, usually actually a combination. I mean, with the invention, there's some aspect, some new thing that's been brought into the world. And usually It's a combination of some new thing with, existing technologies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then innovation is the process of bringing that idea into the world, getting people to adopt it, figuring out the use case, figuring out, the specific ways that this invention is going to be used, right? And hopefully making money. I mean, there's, I guess, debate about whether or not you have to actually make money to innovate. But in some sense, if you can't make money on the idea, then you have to wonder, is it really valuable, right?
Right.
Because to some extent, it's a representation of the value. Yeah, I think that would be the key thing, maybe the difference between invention and innovation, and realizing that it's a whole separate set of activities to innovate. And we can get into that a little bit, but that would be my short answer.
Yeah. And you went right to a great word, which is process. And a lot of people in their minds have this idea that innovation is this lightning strike moment that happens at 3:00 in the morning. You sit bolt upright in your bed and you've got the answer. Mm-hmm. But you definitely went right to the word process. Tell me more about that.
I'll take a specific example, right? Mm-hmm. Something we've been working on in our company for years, really, which is we have a platform for smart speaker surveys, right? For doing surveys, voice-activated surveys on smart speakers. Now, you might think that's just an obvious thing to do, right? Obviously, since you can use a smart speaker to communicate with people in their homes, it would just be a clearly good thing to do a survey over a smart speaker.
Right.
So we've been working on that idea since, I don't know, at least 2019.
Wow.
And it's, the sort of thing where it kind of goes and fits and starts. Because for one thing, if you're trying to do something new, there's always a certain amount of inertia you have to overcome just to get people to change their behavior, right?
Right.
So there has to be some clear benefit.
Right.
Even when you find people, and I should give a lot of credit here to John V. Kumar and Natalie Stewart at General Mills. They were one of the, and I have permission to talk about this because they presented the results at SSP, the Society of Sensory Professionals webinar series. They presented the results. So this is all public knowledge.
Amazing.
Anyway, they were, one of the early adopters of the technology, helped with a question, how does the new thing relate to the existing way of doing things? Mm-hmm. So, because usually you have a problem that's out there in the world that's probably being solved in some way. Like back in the day with the steam engine, there was water in mines, had to be pumped out. And there were really inefficient ways of pumping water out of wells. I mean, even at the far extreme, you might have what Archimedes screw that's getting the water out of the well. So you're solving the problem somehow. You have some better way of solving the problem.
Right.
In our case, we want to get information from consumers. What's their opinion?
Yeah.
Whether it's kind of objective opinion is, stuff stuck to their teeth, or, that's kind of a yes, no question.
Sure.
Or do they like it? A little more subjective, but you want to get that information out of people. Well, you can do it on a phone with, say, people looking at a survey and touching buttons, or, you can do it while people are talking.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of doing a survey with voice would be that someone could pay attention more to the product experience, and they give you more reliable information. You see more clear signals. There's a lot of ideas about why it would be better.
Right.
But then there's the question, is it actually better? Right.
So testing that hypothesis, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got that. First off, I mean, do you even get the same answers, more or less? Right. So that's one question. So the first thing you can do there is take the existing way and compare it head to head with a new way.
Like A/B testing.
Well, yeah, not even really.
Or independent population.
Yeah. Well, you might. Okay. So you have this, in this case, actually, maybe you have the same people, and you have them, half of the people will do the new way first, then the old way. Half of the people do the old way and then the new way. Okay. So you just want to compare and try to figure out, okay, what's going on here with, the new technology? How does it compare to the old technology? But even then, when you go to use the new technology, there's a question of how do you implement it? And this actually gets to another good, I think, important concept around innovation, which is the idea of fast caterpillar versus beautiful butterfly. Because very often with new technology, there's a temptation to simply swap it in one for the old way of solving the problem. So what you might do, for example, with that's called fast caterpillar, where you just do what you were doing before, maybe a little more efficiently. Okay. Beautiful butterfly is where you change the way you work altogether. It's a total transformation.
I like that.
So we can talk about some examples of that. But in the case of the surveys, what you might do is you have your survey the way that you give it on the phone, and you just transcribe it, and you now do it that way on a smart speaker. That's fast caterpillar. Let's just see if we get an advantage. We're just going to swap it in and see what happens.
Right.
And what you find when you do that is, yes, there are some benefits. You get pretty much the same answer. You might see a little bit more differentiation, but you're not really realizing the benefit of the technology, right? That's where you start to get into the beautiful butterfly. Are there new things that you can do that you couldn't do before, right? And I think this is another part of exploring the space of innovation. You got some new thing, right? You got to figure out what you can do with it. This is kind of the product market fit question.
Yep.
Of like trying to find the use case. Okay, you can solve a problem. And so, for example, with smart speaker surveys, you can brush your teeth and answer questions while you're brushing your teeth, or you can be in the shower. Now you start to get into new things, or you can have instructions, where you want to know when someone is preparing food, you'd like to walk them through the measurements. You'd like them to prepare the food properly and guide them through the preparation of the food, and along the way, collect information. And so it becomes this new way of working. But you need partners in this process who are willing to try things, who are willing to invest resources, and are willing to kind of go on this journey with you, because there's going to be twists and turns and unknowns, and not everything's going to work out. And, at the end of the day, I would say at this point now, we've gotten to be very proficient with these surveys, and we really have figured out how to leverage them in new ways. So I think a lot of doors are opening, but this has been 2 years.
Wow.
And this is an idea where you think it's just obvious. Like, well, obviously this is better, let's switch, but it doesn't work like that in real life. Yeah. In real life, you have to actually, you have to be in the trenches, and you have to try new things, and you have to experiment, and not everything's going to work out. And you have to figure out different ways of looking at problems. I mean, sometimes it's quite depressing, honestly. Yeah. Because it seems like everything is lost, but no, it works out. And there you have to always see yourself as being an act. Like if things aren't going well, I personally find it to be very helpful. Think of yourself as being in the second act of a 3-act play. Where the Greek plays, right? They start off, you need to get to know the characters, and then there's something bad that happens, and then there's some resolution. And so if you're in a situation where it seems like something bad is happening, you have to hang in there and see yourself as on this journey. And it's like, no, this is just the story, and there's going to be a resolution, and we just have to find it. And keep going.
I love that second act of a 3-act play analogy. That's great.
Oh yeah. The hero. Well, you know how it is. You've started your own company, the hero's journey. You have to see yourself as being on a hero's journey.
That's right.
Otherwise, it's too depressing. Like,
hope is critical in the entrepreneur's toolkit. That is a critical tool for sure.
And honestly, Jared, I would say this is one of the reasons why I think it's difficult for big companies to innovate, because I think that in a big company, there's always this idea, okay, we're going to have big companies will have incubators, and they'll have, we're going to get some smart people, we're going to put them in the incubator, and we're going to let them go for it. We're going to have their own little startup. Well, the thing that makes me a little bit, I'll just say suspicious, I don't know what the right word is, a little bit doubtful that that's going to work, is that to some extent, to innovate, to be an entrepreneur, you have to be willing to burn the boats. There has to be no way to go back, right? Yeah. And when you have the protection that at the end of the day, you're still going to have a job or something like that, I don't know if this is good advice, but for a big company, maybe the deal is, all right, guys, here's your startup, and if it works, you all get really rich, but if it doesn't, you're fired. Then you might get something. Then you might get something like where they're waking up in the middle of the night, in a cold sweat, worried. Yeah,
because there's no third act without the second act.
Yes.
I know exactly what you're saying. It's really hard to learn the lessons of the second act with a safety net and with a paycheck that's going to hit your account on Friday, regardless of whether this idea works or it doesn't.
Right.
There's just one less step.
Right.
You're likely to stop one step sooner or two steps sooner than if you really feel like the bridges have burned. And I think you're right. There's a difference between exceptional incentives, as in like, you guys knock this out of the park and you'll get this huge bonus.
Right.
And the specter of exceptional suffering.
Right. And actually, it's funny. Progress depends on the second one more. Like, you know about the story of Waymo, right? Where Google had their self-driving car division. And the deal was the people who were working on that, if they hit certain performance goals, were going to get bonuses that were anchored to like the value of the division. Okay. Well, it turns out that when those bonuses hit, that the division was worth so much that everybody got enough money they could all just retire. And that was like the end of that they all left.
So all these brilliant people with all this institutional knowledge and success in building a great division are gone. Yeah. That's funny.
So I think that's something to be careful about. I think if you reward your children too much for like the behavior that you expect to see every day, then they need, like, my son, if I say, all right, if you get up and get your clothes on, we do like allowance or whatever, we'll give you $1, which for him is a lot of money, right? Yeah. Well, maybe one day I'm in a hurry. I'm like, hey, we'll give you $2. Yeah. Now that's what he expects. And he's never going to go back to $1.
It's a new floor.
Right. I think the incentives have to be carefully thought about if you are trying to get, like thinking about, and this is where I think that sometimes being outside the system, you do see more innovations from the outside because people have no choice. They have to keep going. And they don't have, and you only hear about the success stories too, right? That's something
that's exactly right. Yeah. It is a very skewed story. And, not to overuse your analogy, but it's akin to skipping the second act in a play. Right. You meet these people and they live happily ever after. But why do I care that they lived happily ever after? How do I get attached to this at a human level? Yeah. And I think that's the piece that's missing from the corporate approach to internal teams on the payroll. How do you create the care and the emotional investment that's necessary to push through some of the bigger barriers? And I wonder, you read more now about big companies investing a percentage in a startup in their space or whatever. So maybe a meat company might take a small stake in a meatless product, right? Sort of investing in your potential future disruptors. And I wonder if that's their sort of tacit acknowledgement, those specific companies, sort of tacit acknowledgement that you can't, in that model, kind of create the amount of inertia you need to sort of break through that in-house, internally.
Yeah. No, that's right. That is interesting. Yeah, because emotion drives action, right? And fear is one of these emotions that drives action.
That's right. And these people are already passionate.
Right. Yes.
They've already bought into this. You don't have to sell it to them. Yeah. They're already bought into the mission and the concept and the idea. Yeah. So I wonder if that's sort of the next kind of evolution of that model. Right. Yes. It also allows you to diversify risk. It has a lot of benefits to it. I think that the challenge is who's selecting the investments. So if you've got somebody who was raised in the corporate world for 20, 25 years and has been evaluating projects for, a stalwart Fortune 100 company, if they go and then apply that filter and those expectations to a startup, you're not going to get the benefit of the passion and the uniqueness. You're going to weed those out. You're going to filter out the wrong ones. You're going to keep the ones that look most like the existing company. Yeah, especially, classic example, right, would be Kodak, right? Yep. Where they couldn't even really understand the business model for digital cameras because it just didn't make sense. They were steeped in a culture that was based on these, the recurring revenue from the film. And so it didn't fit into their worldview. Exactly. If you have a really new idea and you have a worldview, and a lot of times people aren't even aware of their worldviews, right? You just have your worldview. You don't, you're not consciously aware of it. So that's a challenge. Yeah. I'm going to ask you a quick question about the fast caterpillar versus the beautiful butterfly. Beautiful butterfly. Yeah. There's two ways I think you can look at it. One is either or, and one is sequentially. Right. Yeah. And caterpillar is slow. I'll speed it up now, and then later I'll let it become a butterfly. Are there lessons companies can learn from their fast caterpillar solutions that they can apply to their beautiful butterflies? Does that make sense? Yes, it does. And I guess there's kind of three things, right? The first is that they are different in that
a classic example is in the second industrial revolution. Like the first industrial revolution was about centralized power. Okay. You had the steam engine, and then you have like large vehicles, like a locomotive.
A locomotive,
right?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where you have large engines. Okay.
Yeah. River boats.
Yeah, exactly. And so you have centralized power. And then the second industrial revolution was about decentralized power because you had electricity, which allowed you to have motors everywhere. Mm-hmm. And you have the internal combustion engine. Those were kind of the two main drivers of the second industrial revolution. And so there was this difference. And actually something very interesting is happening right now with the third industrial revolution versus the fourth industrial revolution, where the third industrial revolution was really about centralized computing. And the fourth industrial revolution is about decentralized computing in some sense. Yeah, you have Web3 is coming, right? That's decentralized networks, blockchain, for example, decentralized ledgers.
Right.
That you're going to start to, you've got the Internet of Things pushing sensors out, in the perimeter. You have edge computing. Now, of course, you've got it's artificial intelligence coming as part of the fourth industrial revolution as well.
Right.
Yeah, that can also be centralized. So it's not quite as clean. But going back to the first and second industrial revolution, with decentralized power, a decision that factories had to make was, do we take our steam engine and replace it with a giant electric motor? Or do we put small electric motors all around the factory? There were a lot of debates at the time. In fact, there were even like Harvard Business Review articles, if I remember correctly, on this topic.
Wow. About
which is better, right? Because you could have a big motor in the middle and you have drivetrains running out everywhere.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And it turns out that it's way better to put small motors everywhere. Not even like a little bit better. It's way, way better. And but it was a discussion at the time, especially because people were used to thinking about the world in a certain way.
Yeah.
And the companies that were very successful in the first industrial revolution just replaced the steam engine with a big electric motor, and then they couldn't compete on efficiency. There's just like so much, like you're much more flexible with the small motors. And so that was an example where fast Caterpillar wasn't good enough, that just simply putting in the electric motor and getting some of the benefit didn't realize all of the benefits of the decentralized power.
Right.
So it is important to recognize that they are different things.
Yes.
The next thing I would say is that they can be worked on in parallel, that you can have a big goal, like in our world, like in sensory and consumer science. A big issue that a lot of companies have is that their historical data are kind of a giant mess, that you've got tons and tons of Excel spreadsheets on lots of people's computers. And it's a lot of work to bring all the data together.
Right.
Now, you have to do that if you're going to embrace AI and you're going to leverage all this historical data.
Right.
You have to bring all your data together. So that is a kind of rite of passage for the beautiful butterfly, is to get all the data together. But while that's happening, there's a lot of processes that people are engaged in day to day that can be automated, and you can get a lot of efficiency gains. So the second point I would say is that these two things can be worked on in parallel. It's not like you do fast Caterpillar and then you graduate to beautiful butterfly. Okay.
Right. Right.
You should be aware. You should say, okay, we're going to work on both. You're going to say, okay, let's take stock of our processes. What can we automate?
Got it.
Let's do that at the same time. And especially actually as it can start to snowball because you start to save time.
Yeah. Benefits start to stack up and you get distracted. Yep.
Yeah. So you can get more efficient. And then as you're gaining more efficiency, use that extra capacity to work on the beautiful butterfly. But then the thing that is quite interesting is that sometimes the caterpillar becomes so fast that it starts to seem like a beautiful butterfly because it does change the way you're working. That if your processes are so automated, for example, that things that used to require a lot of work from somebody to do it, that you would avoid asking.
Right.
Like in my world, there might be a question like, all right, you're working in a category and you'd like to know, okay, what are all of the, I don't want to get too technical here.
No,
I think,
go for it.
Okay, what are all the attributes that we've ever asked about in the ice cream category broken up by flavor? That's a question. Now, if you have good processes for getting the answer to that question, then you can get the answer very quickly, right? But if it's really slow to do that, you would be reluctant to ask those questions because you know it's going to be a lot of work.
Right.
So to some extent, the faster the caterpillar gets, the more your capability grows. And it does change eventually the way you're working.
And do you then become less interested in the beautiful butterfly by effect?
No, I would say that's where you do get this thing where the beautiful butterfly can start to emerge because the key difference is, has the way of working changed?
I see.
That's the key question. Because it can just be the old way of working, but faster, more efficient, or it can be some new way of working.
Understood.
And sometimes speed does actually create a new way of working. So with the fact that the costs have gone down so much that, right, this is Say's law, right, from economics, that sometimes supply creates demand, where it's so easy to do something, you might as well do it. And you end up doing it more than you would have otherwise because it just doesn't cost you anything to do it. A good example is now with emails, right? Once upon a time, people used to like you'd have folders and you'd file emails away. Now you can search them. So you just archive them all, you can search.
Right.
That's like a beautiful butterfly thing. So sometimes it's so fast to do something that it just changes the way you're working.
Got it.
But you should always ask yourself, and it's the same way with the smart speakers, right? Or any innovation.
Yeah.
Are we doing the old thing more efficiently? Or are we actually, do we have a new way of solving problems that we are now doing something new with? And I'd say at that point, you've really innovated because now you've got like a new way of doing things. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. That's a great concept. It'll serve me well for sure. As I'm thinking about problems with clients, and I'm sure it'll serve other people well as well.
Oh, thanks. I didn't come up with that chart. I don't remember where I learned about fast caterpillar, beautiful butterfly. I'll look it up and try to send you just to give credit where credit is due, but it is incredibly cool.
Yeah. These tried and true ones are usually, in my experience, the ones that ring the most true. So,
right.
So that's great. So we talked about what innovation is. What isn't, in your mind, innovation?
Well, one thing I would say is when you don't change the way you're working, right? Nothing. When you don't change the way that you're operating, it's just kind of bells and whistles, but it's not really actually different. Let me try to think of an example where it seems like there's progress. Well, here's an example. Right now, I think that central banks are talking a lot about central bank digital currency, right? It's not obvious to me that that's really an innovation. Maybe there's some advantages with double spend and you're going to send money more quickly, but the full vision of something like Bitcoin is that you are going to have a permissionless economy where people can just transact freely. There's this other world that some people are trying to get to.
Right. Yep.
Outside of the system. Whereas the central bank digital currency is kind of like leveraging the technology, but it's not really changing the way that the world works. It wouldn't be transformative in the way that like going to a world where, some of the stuff gets to be political, so I don't really want to go into it too much, but where if you say, all right, look, we're going to allow people to just transact with each other and it's not under the control of the banks. That's different.
Right.
That's a different, right?
Right.
It's like the old thing with a new face on it,
Yeah. Yep.
Then that's not really an innovation.
Yeah.
Another example would be the smart speaker surveys, but you just have the survey. Like, for example, if I was going to ask you how much you like a product, if I do it on the phone, very natural to say it's a 7-point scale.
Yep.
1 to 7, how much do you like it, right? Now, when we do it on the smart speaker, we could ask you on a 7-point scale, with 1 being not at all and 7 being a lot, how much do you like it? And you answer that question. I would argue that's not really an innovation. It's just another way of doing the same thing. Whereas you get some benefits of hand-free or whatever, but an innovation is more like I ask you on the smart speaker, okay, please eat the chocolate bar. You eat it. Do you like it? You say, yes. Do you like it a lot? Yes. Okay. Now you say I've gotten really, you gave that's a 4-point scale because you can think like it or don't like it a lot, don't like it. Yeah, like it could be that, either you don't like it and you really don't like it, or you don't like it, but you only don't like it a little.
Yeah.
It's a 4-point scale. The point is that is now actually a new interaction for somebody.
It's new perspective, new information.
Well, it's conversational, right? If I was going to ask you, like, how are you doing today, Jared? I wouldn't say on a 7-point scale, with 1 being not very good and 7 being very good. It isn't that. And so when you go to the voice and you change the way you do your surveys and you make them conversational, now you're innovating because now you're really giving a new experience. It's a new way of doing your surveys and it agrees with technology. So maybe that's one way to put this is like, sometimes there's a new technology, but it just gets applied with the old way of looking at things. And that's not innovation. It's not enough to simply have an invention. There has to be some new approach to life that comes out of the.
And by extension, I would imagine there's a new form of value created.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, there certainly is a lot more value that gets created. Well, another example that you see sometimes, that you see this all over the world, like in Italy, I was in Italy in early 2000s. You go to some parts of Italy that are more, poor, whatever. Basically, where there used to be a donkey, there's now a motorcycle, and they just swap it in, right?
Yep.
Not really an innovation. You're not really leveraging everything about the technology. You're just doing what you used to do, but with a motorcycle instead of a donkey.
Right.
And so, whereas if you really embrace the technology, then it's just gonna be a totally different way of operating. Motorcycles kind of have their place in a modern society. They're not just faster donkeys. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that that's definitely something to look for. And to your point, there should be like a step change in the amount of value that's been created. It shouldn't just be 30% more. It should be the 10x, right? Where something different is happening.
Yeah, exactly. So, John, you've got amazing, background and experience in this space, and seeing innovation from a number of different angles with clients and internal to, building your own company and all sorts of things. It's kind of sort of a broad question, but do you have any advice for innovators?
Yeah. The biggest bit of advice I give to anybody is to keep going, because, I think it's so easy to be in a position where things are hard, right?
Yep.
And to think that there's something wrong with you, that you look around, it's like you're in a race. I don't know if you're a runner, Jared, but like if you're in a race and you look around, everybody else looks great, and you're suffering and you're wondering, what's wrong with me? but they're suffering too, right?
Right.
And I think it's very easy right now to look around and to think, oh, other people have it easy because you're suffering.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly true that life is not equally hard for everybody, but it is true that it is actually anybody who's doing something interesting and new, it is also hard for them. Elon Musk, I'm sure he has had some very dark moments in his life. Apparently, he was very close at one point. I think it was SpaceX. They were like a few hours away from going out of business one year. If something didn't come through, I think it was either SpaceX or Tesla. Like he convinced his girlfriend's parents to mortgage their house or something to get a little bit of extra money. I mean, it was like really on the edge. And this goes back to only hearing about the success stories.
Yeah.
But it was like really touch and go.
Wow.
That it's easy to think that, oh, well, it's not for me. Life's not fair, whatever. And I'll just go back. But no, I would say keep going. That's the number one thing, is to keep going, because it is actually hard for everyone. I can't tell you how many times, like when I started Aigora, like in the first few months, this like soul sucking sickness in my stomach. Like I just felt so empty. You're trying to create something new. You're trying to bring something new to the world. Not everybody gets it. You're trying to convince people to give you money for this new thing.
Right.
And it's hard. And that's just the way it is.
That is so true.
Yeah.
Your description is just a perfect one of that feeling.
Yeah.
The ups and the downs.
Yeah.
And, people talk about the ups. That doesn't go unreported or undiscussed, but it's those downs that you're talking about.
Yes.
It's a great point about the race analogy is a great one, because when you hear people talking, they're talking about their ups, but you don't think about who's not talking at the moment.
Right.
And what they might be going through at the moment. And so, that is great advice. Keep going. That is wonderful advice.
You can do it. You really can do it. Keep going. Just like dig down. You can do it. You're capable of a lot more than you think you are, and keep going. That's really important.
That is wonderful.
Another one is get a coach. Get somebody who has been through this. Actually, you and I both work with David Fields. I would just a little shout out to David Fields, who you, Jared. He's my coach. I think he's your coach also, Jared. He is an excellent coach. And finding somebody, they don't have to have necessarily worked in the area, but someone who's been through the process of building something, right? Who can guide you, who has some structures and some experience, that makes a big difference. And having somebody to talk to, because it's very lonely a lot of times. If you're on the frontier doing something new, you're probably out there by yourself. So if it's really new. So that's another one. Network is another one, I would say. Talk to people and talk to everybody about what you're doing, because you don't know, and ask people to introduce you. Like you're saying, here's my thing. Can I show you my thing? And you're like, okay, what do you think? You get feedback, right? And then you say, is there anybody that you think would like to see this, or that could give us feedback or whatever? But like socialize it as much as possible. Don't hold on to it. Don't like try to perfect it in secret and then release it. Talk to everybody. Because the fact is that if it's really a new idea, you're going to have a hard enough time getting anybody. Like no one's going to steal your idea.
Right. Exactly. And that is the one. I mean, I wish I'd heard everything you just said 6 years ago when I was starting out. The most critical mistake, the big mistake I made was not talking more about what I was doing and building. And I feel like there's two kind of modes that people get into that drive that. My mode was, it's not good enough to bother people with yet.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
The other mode is, I don't want someone to steal this.
Right.
I have to keep this under wraps because it is valuable. So it's almost like some people hold back because they don't think it's valuable enough. And some people hold back because of the value they see in it.
That's interesting.
Neither approach is right. is helpful, I should say.
Yeah.
In 2021, with the technology and the connectedness that we have as a society, sharing what you're thinking is very low risk. You and I are essentially consultants, and we trade in ideas. So a podcast Your podcast, Aigora Cast, this podcast, conceptually could be viewed as, oh, well, why are you giving away what you know about innovation? Why are you giving away about what you know about, your space for free? People can just listen to the podcast. They won't call you. That's not a method of thinking anymore in this space.
Yeah.
But there's still pockets of that in other industries and other domains where people are still thinking, I can't share this. I can't talk about this. I have to get it patented. I have to get a copyright. I have to do this. I have to protect it. But putting it out there does what, you and I do for each other, which is you share an idea with me and it sparks thought in my head. I share an idea with you, it sparks a thought in your head. And we go off with our new, different, better ideas and do things with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been slow to take hold in more product-based and service and non-professional service-based organizations.
That's interesting. Okay, there's a lot in what you just said that we can unpack. There's a ton of things to react to. So, okay, let's kind of go through the various things that you said because it's all very interesting. So the first was that as far as not wanting to bother people about your ideas, and I would expect that you would agree with me on this, that personally, any person who is sincerely trying to improve themselves or their lives, I will help.
Yep.
From the bottom of my soul, I have nothing but respect for people who are trying to improve their lives.
Yep.
If someone contacts me, someone reached out on Twitter. They're trying to learn Clarity, which is a Web3 programming language for Stacks, which is actually a very good, interesting platform. But anyway, they contacted me. They have been doing stuff for like 2 months. They wanted to get some advice about doing something. I said, sure, let's have a call. And then I gave them a little project to do. And we might end up hiring them, And it's because they took the initiative to reach out.
Yeah.
And this is the person previously they owned a fencing company. Okay.
Wow.
And now they're transitioning to be a Web3 developer. I'm happy to support someone like that. Okay. Happy.
Amazing.
Amazing. That's somebody who's trying to improve their life.
Yep.
That is a good thing. Of course, I'm going to help somebody like that. And another thing is, if you reach out to a bunch of people and some people don't get back to you, who cares? You weren't talking to you anyway. Like
exactly. You haven't lost anything.
Yeah. You went from having no relationship to having no relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
And especially as you mentioned with technology, you've got LinkedIn. I send connection requests every day to at least 5 people. I search for people of common interests, constantly trying to connect with people, meeting people, ask for introductions. That's one. Twitter's, you have to be careful. You have to mute topics because you can get sucked into distractions on Twitter.
Oh, yeah.
But if you use it for professional purposes with very clear guardrails, I think it can be really good. So that's for networking. You can meet really interesting people.
Yeah.
Especially with COVID now. You don't have to be in San Francisco if you want to do tech. You can be anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. You can have these phone calls.
Exactly.
On the other side about protecting your idea, the fact is that if you're passionate about an idea and you're a talented person, which most people are, most people are talented at the thing they're passionate about for whatever reason. The universe has blessed us. It doesn't really curse us with passion for things that we have no talent for. So if you really care about something and you're working on it, there's first off, the people who might compete with you are probably doing something else anyway.
Yeah.
So and why would they stop doing something that's productive to do something that's untested?
Yeah.
There's no guarantee that what you're doing is going to work out. So why would they stop doing what they're doing to do what you're going to do?
Yeah.
Really good ideas, it's not obvious they're going to work out because they're new.
Right.
So they're probably not. And you know what? Even if people copy you, and we're going through this now because we have a new algorithm for optimizing trades between large groups of people that we're working on this while we're doing Web3 stuff. And so we're meeting people, and it is nerve-wracking because you think, oh, what if someone's going to steal my idea or do the same or whatever? Could happen.
Yeah.
But they'll do it differently. They'll end up working in some other part of the space. It's a giant world.
Yep.
If your idea is really creating value, even if other people do it, it's not like anybody can capture all the value.
Right.
It's a giant world. And so,
right.
So I think you can be a little bit strategic and start. I mean, one good bit of advice that I think I got from Seth Godin gives the advice that you should strive to be in the largest pond in which you are still the largest fish. Try to niche down with your use case or whatever to the point that you have the best solution in the space, whatever the space is, so that people who are in that space can find you.
Right.
Because globally now it's so interconnected, right?
Yeah.
So, and if you can go to a bigger pond and still be the biggest fish, then that's good.
Right.
But when you're starting, do niche it down so that your use case is so well defined that for that use case, you are the obvious choice. And then grow it out. That would be something else. No one can capture all the value in the world. Share your idea. People will do something else. Have faith in your ability to come up with new things because you will, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a scarcity mindset that underlies that way of thinking. It's a great point. Yeah.
Right. And like you and I, if we say something interesting on the show and somebody wants to like, oh, that's a show and talk to those people, their problem will interact with our knowledge in some new way, and we'll have some extra insights for them. So it's not like this is everything I know.
Yeah, exactly. Dr. John Ennis, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts and your perspective. And all the best to you and everything you're building at Aigora. And please check his own podcast, Aigora Cast.
Yeah, so you listen to Jared.
Yeah, he let me in for an episode. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll have to do this again soon.
Oh, sounds good. And let me just say, Aigora.ai is our company.
Yes, please.
If you're in food, beverage, ingredient, in any kind of consumer-facing product, check out Aigora.ai. We help sensory and consumer science teams implement artificial intelligence. That's our business. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And like I said, we'll talk again soon. Thanks for your sharing.
Okay, always a pleasure. Thanks a lot, Jared.
All right, take care. We'd love to hear your thoughts about this week's show. You can drop us a line on Twitter at OutlastLLC, OUTLAST LLC, or follow us on LinkedIn where we're Outlast Consulting. Until next time, keep innovating, whatever that means.